All right, we're here with Coach Dave Crowell, Nazareth High School at the FCA Wrestling Camp at Kutztown for 2015. Coach, how'd the practice go today?
Oh, it was really good. Kids were really engaged. They were into it. They did a great job.
Good, good. Well, this is what, your third year back at camp? Second, maybe?
Yeah, this is at least 3 years I know I've been here.
Good. So can you just share with us, how'd you get connected to FCA Wrestling and then why you enjoy being involved in the ministry?
Yeah. Well, first, probably our first involvement, I'm very good friends with Dr. Jared Spencer, sports psychologist, lives in the Lehigh Valley. I've known him for a number of years. Great Christian. He's got a great secular business, but everything is a Christian foundation, and he's just got a great take on things. So we kind of discussed, actually, in a way, matter of fact, it was after we were both here sharing at the FCA wrestling camp that we stopped for ice cream on the way home. In our vehicles, we stopped, and we're sitting there just bouncing ideas back and forth. And we both have a passion for integrating sports with a firm foundation of Christianity. You know, I just think sports have a potential to actually create pain and sense of loss. It can be very negative, but if it's paired with Christian principles and Christianity, it has the potential to have tremendous advantages for anyone. So we're just kind of throwing ideas back and forth on how we can do this. So Jared ended up saying, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to open my house up one night a week. We decide on a Sunday night. We're just going to invite wrestlers. So it's a little bit outside the mainstream of FCA. We're going to be sports specific. That's one of his passions. His probably greatest passion of sports is wrestling. And he was a former wrestler. So just going to open up to wrestlers. So I honestly didn't think it was going to work. I thought it was going to be a huge bomb. But as it turned out, God had a much different idea and plan than we had. And it ended up being very, very successful. A lot of wrestlers came through his home. You know, it's always kind of like a little, it's kind of moves around a little bit. It flows. You know, you have guys come in, some guys move out, but we've probably had up to 100 wrestlers over the last 3 years that have come through there. A lot of Lehigh University wrestlers come on a regular basis. So it's been, like a lot of things, we had an idea of helping kids show them that there is a way that's beyond just winning and losing.
Sure.
But probably, I think the greatest benefit has been to me. I go there and I'm encouraged by these kids. When I look at myself back in those days, when I was a teenager or early 20s, probably the last place I would have been would be at a Bible study on a Sunday night, when I was in college. But these kids come out and they are hungry to hear God's word and really embrace it. They really take it in and they do a great job applying it to their lives.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that about how you guys actually kickstarted that thing. But like you said, that's kind of become the nucleus for ministry in the Valley. I've been in there seeing junior high all the way up to college wrestlers. And just want to dovetail that in. So in addition to coming to camps, in addition to the huddle, you had served on our FCA wrestling trip to South Korea. And I remember being on a plane with you for, what were we on, 13 hours or something like that.
13 and a half, I believe.
And part of our conversation, I was just picking your brain a little bit, and I had asked you what you thought, if there was one thing that a coach was going to impart to an athlete in 2015, I asked you what you thought, and I was expecting maybe a hard work, maybe just about your work ethic, something related to that. But you had said that the thing that you think is the most important for a coach to impart to an athlete is dependability, which I thought was a little bit outside the box, maybe not the first word on everyone's mind. Can you just maybe explain yourself there and why you think, of all the things that you can impart from a coach to an athlete, why you think dependability is at the top of the list?
Yeah, I think it's a characteristic of character that probably applies to every area of our lives. And so I look at coaching. I mean, obviously when I first got into it, I just wanted to win. I was like an athlete, you just care about winning. But probably as I became, when I first started coaching, I was not a Christian. I didn't become a Christian until my second year as a head wrestling coach. So I accepted Christ in the fall of late summer, early fall of 1978. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of my age. But that once I became a Christian, that changed everything for me. just earthly success. I still like to win like anybody else, but that took kind of a backseat to things that I thought have true value, lasting value. So you kind of start to look at sports. Yeah, you want to win, but in that process, who do you become in the process of chasing your goals or whatever? And I personally think one of the saddest things that there is in life is somebody that goes through, say, their high school career or even their college career, maybe their Olympic career, and experiences and attains success on the earthly level of championships and things, but have nothing else. That is the saddest thing to me, I think, that there could be. That you've gone through this process and have nothing more than maybe a way of winning wrestling matches or basketball games or track or whatever it is. And so I've always looked at it as that I think athletics are a great way. But the interesting thing is the qualities that you are hoping to develop that can help them succeed on the athletic realm, I think are exactly the same qualities that will help them later on in their professional lives, in their family lives, in their social lives, in all these things. So yeah, when we have a little thing, we call it our honor code, but I have that as one of my priorities, probably top priority of my athletes is to be dependable, to be real. Because it doesn't matter how successful you are, how talented you are, how many matches you win, if you can't be depended on, you're no good to the team, and you're really not even any good to yourself, because eventually it's going to crash down. But that's exactly the same thing that's going to be true later on in life. You can be the smartest guy in your company, but if you let them down, if you cheat or lie or steal, or you can't be depended on to show up when that, it's crunch time, none of those other things are going to matter.
Sure. Well, again, dovetailing into kind of how FCA wrestling might address something like that, we're really big on the three-dimensional coaching model, and you've shared with me it's something that you've kind of grown an affinity for. You've presented it a few times. We'll be presenting in the fall. And just for those who might be watching and not aware, can you just kind of summarize briefly what the three dimensions are, and then we'll go from there. Can you just summarize 3D coaching for us?
Yeah, three-dimensional coaching in a nutshell is basically this, that there are three aspects of every athlete that will determine not only how successful they are, but their level of satisfaction and joy and all those good things you should get out of an athletic experience. So the first dimension is the physical part. So that is the skills, that's the strength training, the endurance, the strategy, all those things that you would think that a coach needs to do to make their athlete successful. It's critical. If you don't understand the first dimension, if you don't have the latest football strategies, if you don't have the latest systems, the latest things, what's new, the latest skills in wrestling, if you don't have those things, you're behind the 8 ball. I mean, other people they're gonna out-coach you. So that's critical to sports, but it's not the only part. And again, it's like the athlete that's talented and skillful, if they don't have the other parts, it's going to still collapse. So that is, I think statistically about 85% of coaches coach only in the first dimension. They don't do anything beyond skills, training, things like that. The second dimension is the psychology of it. So that is, how are you preparing for competition? And again, we've all seen those athletes that are tremendously talented, but once they're in a competitive situation, when it's on the line, we call it choke, or they have a somewhat less than, they have a subpar performance. When they need it the most, they find it the hardest time to be able to do that. So that's the second dimension. The third dimension, though, is the heart. And from the Christian perspective, it is the spiritual part of every human being. I firmly believe that every human was created in the image of God, body, soul, and spirit. Body is the physical part, the soul is the psychology part, and the spirit is the spiritual part of the athlete. When we can have that part, where you can now trust in a power greater than you, you can give your problems over to God, you can trust a Bible that always tells you the truth, that promises that never fail you. That creates, to me, in three-dimensional coaching, the complete athlete, where you are complete. You got the physical part, you're psychologically you got that part, and you're at peace with yourself, and you can depend on a power greater than yourself. You are now the complete out. You now are able to much better reach your potential, the potential that God created us for.
So people listening to this would probably say, okay, the majority of coaches there's no loss whatsoever for the first dimension. You get on with the YouTube, with Flow, with all the available information. There is no lack of first dimension stuff out there whatsoever. And maybe even a smaller tier, you would have a psychology. There, of course, with the internet, there's articles, there's videos. So coaches might have some strategies there for the second dimension to reach the mind. But do you mind sharing, do you have one intentional tactic out of maybe many for you that you might use to reach the hearts of your athletes? How do you instill value? Do you have any tangible tactics that a coach listening to this might be able to take away?
Yeah, well, a couple things I'll do. I teach in a public school, so I'm restricted like anybody else that coaches in public schools to what I can share with my athletes without getting myself in trouble and get myself fired. So I can't help anybody if I'm fired. So, but I will actually use biblical quotes. I definitely coach from a biblical perspective. So one of the things that my athletes hopefully see from me is that we love our athletes, whether they are successful or not, whether they blow it or not, we are sharing with them, we are communicating, not only communicating, but demonstrating to them that we love them. We use the word love to our kids, well, at least I do. And I tell them, I love you. And sometimes I'm doing it, I'm saying, I love you, but you failed in this area. We might have to discipline you, but we're disciplining you because I love you. So that's one thing. We demonstrate, we do our very best, or I do my very best to demonstrate what a Christian coach should look like, that cares about them beyond their wins and their losses. So that's one strategy that I put in right away. Another thing to do is that I'll actually use biblical examples. I will tell them stories. While I can't promote Christianity, I can use the Bible as a literary source. So I will tell them stories about, what this particular David and Goliath, about how, David, we know the David and Goliath story, but actually David was prepared for his Goliath episode in private when he was faced with fighting a lion and fighting a bear with his bare hands. Nobody even saw that. Yet that, an earlier test helped prepare him for a later test. So I'll give them those kind of examples, and I'll use them from the Bible. I'll use Bible quotes, even though I won't maybe tell them where it's found. I will quote things from the Bible. And so that's probably more of the way that I would model the third dimension, and hopefully you get them, and my goal always is to get my kids so that they start to care about each other. So it's one of my favorite stories I tell. It's got a biblical background. It's not a Bible story, but it's called The Woodcutter and the White Horse. I stumbled on this story. I had a Christian radio station. On my way home from practice, I turned the radio on and was finishing up this story. And it talked about this woodcutter and white horse, so I just Googled it. Well, come to find out it was a story. And I think it's on Max Licado's website. I know that's I think where I found it first. And so I've used this story about this wood. It's a tale really, but it's got a great Christian foundation and great Christian principles to it without ever using the name of Christ in it. And I've used this story, I've shared it with Christian coaching friends of mine, dear friends, who have confessed to me later that it's been so meaningful to them, they actually think about it all the time. Because in a nutshell, it's a story about a guy who has good things happen to him and bad things happen. And we have a tendency to, when things are great, we're on top of the world. When things are bad, we look that everything's bad, everything's, we're in the dumps, we're everything. But bottom line is, life has ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys, but they're all from God's perspective, which is how we have to view life. They're all love designed and all designed for our ultimate good. God promises that all things work for the ultimate good for those that love Him. So when we can start to view that life, we can start to see the blessing behind the difficulty. And when we can see that, we don't get so down, when things are not going well. So, I've shared that, like every one of my kids on my team know the story of the woodcutter and the white horse. And as a matter of fact, we had that happen where something kind of, we lost one of our athletes, and so I'm sitting down explaining, we're not going to have this athlete for the next month and a half. He's pulled away and he can't, he's got to be somewhere else. And one of my kids said, and actually one of the ones I would least expect, said, Coach, it's sort of like the woodcutter and the white horse. And I realized they actually do listen to some of that stuff when you're telling them. So, when you can start to give them a view of life higher than what just it looks like on the surface, it can really lend itself to maybe when he has those questions, now I have the opportunity to share Christ with him on a much deeper level and a much more personal level.
Perfect. Well, for anybody that's looking for more information, they can go to 3dimensionalcoaching.com. They have also the hard copy of the book, which is the 3D Coach by Dr. Jeff Duke, and you've read that one and done some presenting as well. So, Coach, thanks so much for your perspective. You got anything else for us?
Just if I ever give anybody a suggestion, it's trust God. I have gotten more coaching wisdom from God's Word than any book that I've ever read. Even though the 3-dimensional coaching book was great, it was probably the best coachings just on the coaching subject I've ever read. But God's Word gives us some great wisdom for dealing with a life as a coach or a father or anything else. Probably never a more difficult time to do any of those things. And we can always depend on God's Word.
Perfect. Well, that's a great word to end on. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.